Hello everyone. So I wanted to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So I am not a fan of Alex Kurtzman, J.J. Abrams, Akiva Goldsman, any of these other assholes who have been responsible for New Trek. They're terrible writers. J.J. Abrams is a competent, if somewhat misguided, director. But how they treated Star Trek fans back when their movies came out in 2009 and up to the more recent ones, how they treated the fans was bullshit. They treated us as though we were the problem with Star Trek because we wanted Star Trek to adhere to what had come before. We valued continuity. Continuity not only in appearance but also in characterization and in the philosophy of Star Trek. Now we have Star Trek where you have characters killing, you have heroes, our heroes, murdering people almost indiscriminately. Well, that's certainly not upholding the legacy, the true legacy of Star Trek. It's tainting it. For those of us whom are old enough or well, for those of us who know Star Trek. Now, I will say that I appreciated that Abrams and his team, when they made their movies, that they went to great trouble to establish it as an alternate reality. I appreciated that, and I liked it. It was neat. You know, it took the key, and it was perfectly acceptable within the universe of Star Trek. We'd seen that before, not only in TOS with Mirror Mirror, but also in TNG with the episode Parallels, and other episodes throughout the other Star Trek series. So it was perfectly in line with, with Star Trek that could happen. They made mistakes in how they represented the Prime timeline. But, the problem that I had with those movies was characterization, the story. They told the same story 3 times. Bad guy gets super weapon and wants to destroy the universe. That's basically the Wrath of Khan. And they just remade the Wrath of Khan 3 times. It's like, well, you're doing a real disservice to Star Trek's legacy. And it's obvious that they didn't watch enough Star Trek to understand one of the primary things that kept Star Trek going for all these decades was its diversity in storytelling. One week you could have kind of a political intrigue story. Another week you could have a lighthearted story about tribbles or about, some backward society. Or you could, the next week you could, have some anomaly that they have to deal with, or some socio-political topic that they tackle, or time travel, or this or that, or this or that. The possibilities for storytelling in Star Trek are literally infinite. They are endless. And so to confine yourself to the same story over 3 movies is just, well, it shows a distinct lack of vision and lack of creativity. So when it comes to the newer Star Trek TV shows, those problems carried on because some of the same people were working on these newer shows. And Star Trek Picard Season 2 has turned out to be a disaster. It's a muddled mess. It brings things up and then drops them without any kind of explanation or anything else. It's just bad. And the characters are not written properly. And again, they kill, you know, indiscriminately at times. And that's against the very ethos, you know, of Star Trek. Especially for the character of Picard, you know. So when they announced Star Trek Strange New Worlds, I was kind of, you know, based upon the character of Pike and Spock and number one from Discovery. When I saw those characters on Discovery, primarily the character of Pike and number one, I didn't care for Spock, for either how he was written, how he was performed. I didn't like their version of Spock at all. Leonard Nimoy has a very specific cadence that he created for Spock, and very specific mannerisms, and the guy, I think his name is Ethan Peck, the guy who's playing him just doesn't have any of that. Although in one of the shorts, the short tracks, he beams on board and he's yelling, and they kind of make light of that, and that was actually fun and enjoyable, and it worked. You know, they actually addressed that in a novel dealing with Captain Pike. I have it somewhere. I think it's called Burning Dreams, where the reason that Spock was yelling in the pilot, The Cage, was because he knew that humans could not hear as well as Vulcans, and so he assumed that they were almost deaf, and so he would yell everything so that they could hear him. And yeah, that was funny. But I could see the potential. I especially liked the character of Pike. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't being portrayed as Jeffrey Hunter had portrayed him, which I would have preferred. But he was in the ballpark of being more like a captain, you know, a Starfleet officer. And so I was like, you know, they should make a show out of that. And I went online and I suggested that a couple of times, and as did many other people. So they've made it a show, and it's called Strange New Worlds. The sets, I made a big long video about when they just showed the transporter room, and the video, I just went off on them, and I still stand behind what I said in that video, but I didn't post it. I've not yet posted it. Having seen more, I've seen all the trailers, I've seen all the stuff, I've seen the updated version of the Enterprise. In fact, I have it here. I'll probably do a video on this. I do have some windows there on the saucer rim. I like the props. The props actually are really great. I have a phaser. I'm getting a Strange New Worlds phaser. So I'm the first person who's going to be receiving this particular version printed from this particular person, so that's really exciting. And of course I'll show it off, you know, once I get it here. I promised him that I'd show it off. But I would do it anyway. Anyway, so seeing the trailers and absorbing all of the media around the show thus far, I've had problems with the changes they made to the Enterprise. I've had you know, inside and out. I've had problems with the characterizations, but I think that this new show, all the previous Star Trek shows of New Trek have all had the long form storytelling. You know, they had a season long arc, or in the case of Picard, multi-season long arcs. I think with something like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, you can do that and really get away with it. But in Star Trek, it's a detriment because um, one of the things that has made Star Trek endure is that diversity in storytelling. And so when you're devoting an entire season to one story, or multiple seasons to one story, you're specifically removing that diversity in storytelling. You're kind of, cutting off your nose to spite your face. Well, Strange New Worlds is going to be episodic. And I had heard rumors that they were going to do that, that Anson Mount wanted that, and I was like, yeah, okay, knowing these guys, it's just a bunch of bullshit, or it's, you know, to make fans want to see the show or whatever. But in the latest promotional thing, promoting the show, you have the actors sitting there saying it's episodic. Well, that makes it pretty clear. I mean, the producers will generally lie through their teeth, but the actors, they do on occasion do that, because promoting the show is part of their job, unfortunately. And but this time it seems, I mean, you can't be that blatant about it and then not do it. You're going to lose people eventually if you lie to them to that extent. So yeah, the fact that it's going to be episodic, that's a big plus for me. That's what I've been wanting from a Star Trek series. I don't mind when you have certain subplots that will carry through, in more than one episode. I don't see that as a detriment. I mean, it can be difficult because someone who watches the show casually, you know, like I might want to watch an episode of TNG, like Booby Trap. Well, you watch the episode Booby Trap, it's devoted to that storyline. If they have other stuff going in the background, if I'm a more casual viewer, I'm not going to know what's going on, and it could become a detriment. But I don't mind when they do have subplots that run through more than one episode, if done done right. But yeah, it's not a radical change to my feelings about Strange New Worlds, but from what I'm seeing, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to personally let go of the baggage that I have with regards to the other new Trek series like Picard and Discovery and Lower Decks and that kind of stuff. I couldn't even make it through Lower Decks. I couldn't fucking watch it. It's a fucking dumpster fire of a TV show. Talk about the antithesis of Star Trek. But even though they tend to lean more towards the continuity than any of the other shows, but it's just the writing and characterization that I find vile, and it is vile. But yeah, I'm putting all that aside, and I'm going to go into Strange New Worlds with the mindset of this is a new Star Trek show. This is a new show. I'm not going to associate it with the original series. Captain Pike is one of my favorite characters in all of Star Trek, even though we only saw him in essentially 3 episodes, and in 2 of those episodes he was just basically a vegetable. I really love the episode The Cage, and I love everything about it, and including Captain Pike, the character. And so I want a Captain Pike who's more stern and more serious and more professional, and more inhibited in that way, and I want to explore that. Why is this guy so stern? What makes him think that he has to have that disconnect? Or what makes him have that disconnect, whether necessary or not, in reality. That's what I want. I want to explore that. This show isn't going to explore that, I know. But were I making the show, that's what I would explore, are those aspects of the characters and their characterizations and why they are like that. And Spock was more emotional and talked louder and had higher energy because Leonard Nimoy knew and understood that Jeffrey Hunter's performance was more subdued, and so he had to increase the energy to counter that. And Leonard Nimoy, being a good actor, he understood that. And then when William Shatner came in, and Shatner was, fucking bouncing off the goddamn walls, Leonard Nimoy was then able to get to the character that we knew was Spock. But, all that said, I will say it doesn't make a bit of sense to have all these other characters from later in TOS be on the Enterprise at this time, And Nurse Chapel doesn't seem anything like how she was. Not at all. So that to me is kind of a disappointment. I would prefer that she be more like how she was. But having M'Benga in there was good. I like that. The actor's a good-looking guy, so that's a plus for me. And I always liked that character. It was always nice to see more diversity and more representation in the casting. It doesn't affect me as much to have people of color be in media, but it does affect people of color to have more representation in media, just like it affects trans people to have more representation in media. So in that sense, it does affect me positively. I want that, but it is nice to see that, I live in a very diverse area now, which is good, and so for me it's like, oh hey, okay, there's more diversity here, and I found that it's always healthier to celebrate that, because the world is diverse. There's nothing you're going to do about that. Hating people for something as stupid as, them having more melanin in their skin than you is just, it's a waste of time and energy, really. It's easier to just embrace them and embrace people, and that is Star Trek. That's the whole fucking goddamn point of Star Trek, is to promote those ideas and ideals. So yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with Uhura being there. Certainly characters and officers get transferred around, so, whatever. But, yeah, I'm going into it with an open mind, completely open, completely fresh, no baggage. My only concern is the quality of storytelling, because these guys who run New Trek have proved that most of them are not very good writers. And that's what I want. There are certain episodes of Star Trek that when I watch them, it's like eating a hearty meal. You're full. You're well nourished afterwards, and you can have that emotional satisfaction. Yesterday's Enterprise is a perfect example of that. You know, there's a lot of meat on those bones, and that episode was written and rewritten by like 20 people. You know, so that is not necessarily an indicator of quality either way. You can have an episode of television that's written by one person and still have it be shit. And you can have an episode that's written by 25 people and have it be great. You know, that's not necessarily an indicator. But yeah, I'm just gonna go into it. And I'm gonna go, okay, well, some of the shit looks like just way too advanced, like the transporter room. Engineering is in the right direction. I was looking at some of the sets, pausing, you know, and looking at some of the sets in engineering, and they had panels, and they would have a whole panel, and then they would have like a little control here, and a little control here, and a little control there. And the panel would be kind of like a satin black color with red trim, just like it was in the original series. And they even had schmutz, like imperfections in the paint, you know. And I was like, oh my god, they did that. They got that right. You go back and watch episodes of the original series in HD, and you can see those smudges and those imperfections in the paint and that kind of stuff. They did that. They got that right. And that's how an actual working vessel would be. There would be scuff marks. There would be worn paint, you know? Because these things are so intricate, and there's so much to maintain, they're not necessarily going to worry about, you know, what the paint looks like down in the bowels of the ship. You know, they'll probably care about it in the living habitation spaces, you know, and places where dignitaries would go. They're not going to care about it down, you know, in the deuterium tanks or the fucking water tanks or whatever, you know. So I love that, and I love that they paid attention to that, and the new props are an obvious indication that they cared at least enough to try and adhere to some type of TOS aesthetic, you know. When you have things like this, pocket computers, which kind of double as phones, being a phone is almost a secondary function of these things, but when you have that level of technology now that we didn't have back in the 90s, when you have that level of technology and you have all of this kind of technology, it makes sense to integrate that into your futuristic world that's set 300 years in the future, you know. Even though there was a big apocalypse and we could have lost certain technologies during World War III and that kind of thing, I don't necessarily have a problem. But they have the little jeweled buttons from TOS, and they have the physical buttons from TOS. Good, do that. Have that. We want that. You know, that's for the fans, and I appreciate that. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Strange New Worlds. Of course, this is all before the show has come out, and I haven't seen it yet. So, I'll talk about it after I've seen it. I'm gonna probably review the first episode, and then I'll wait a while, and I'll get a feel for the series, and then I'll go and do another review. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.